So, the Star Wars canon. This has been an issue for fans ever since the Disney buyout, plus the announcement that they were going to scrap the old expanded universe to make way for the sequel trilogy. And unless you are some time traveler from before 2015, we all know how well that's worked out. Now there are rumors going around that, after their terrible reception, the sequel trilogy films are going to be erased. Whether that means they're being erased from the canon or whether Disney's going to try and just airbrush them out and pretend they never existed is unknown. But even if this turns out to be nothing but rumors, it did get me thinking about Star Wars and its canon. Because the Disney buyout, you see, was not the first instance of previous lore being discarded. The 3D Clone Wars series retconned a few interesting events, and there are even books that predate the official expanded universe that have been discarded. And while I have very little good to say about Disney Star Wars, there have been a few stories that I think are genuinely good. So even if the sequel trilogy is gotten rid of, do they not have a place anymore? And if they did, what does that imply for all the previously established lore of the so-called Star Wars legends? What would an official, hard and fast Star Wars canon look like? Or, to be perfectly honest, what do I think an official, hard and fast Star Wars canon would look like? And so, I decided to use this little video to make an announcement of sorts. I've been bouncing around several different franchises and lores for months now, and I've been told that that makes it a little hard for viewers to follow me. So instead, I've decided to streamline it and limit myself to two different lores, 40K and Star Wars, because these are the two biggest universes with the most things for me to talk about. So I'll do a 40K lore video one week and a Star Wars lore video / canon discussion the next week, and only really go to a different kind of universe on a special occasion, like say when the Dune movie comes out late this year, I'll rip off a few new Dune videos. Or perhaps start on the Wheel of Time if we get any more updates or a trailer on that adaptation. Heck, the recent trailer for the Foundation TV series looks so good that I might consider doing a lore series on that when that series premieres. So, with the explanation out of the way, let's start by revisiting the only bit of Star Wars lore that I've covered so far. Dark Horse's Dawn of the Jedi comic series written by John Ostrander. Quick summary for those who don't want to click the link and see my original video. Dawn of the Jedi starts off with the origin story of the Jedi Order. A bunch of mystical pyramid things called the Tho-Yor go to several planets and transport Force-sensitive individuals of various races from said planets to a world called Tython, a planet so attuned to the Force that any imbalance between the light and the dark side results in natural disasters like earthquakes, tempests, or tidal waves. The Force sensitives then come together and eventually establish the Jedi Order and the basis of the Jedi philosophy and training. But this is only the prologue, and the main story takes place generations later when the galaxy is being threatened by the Rakata, a race introduced in Knights of the Old Republic. The Rakata are a race of cannibalistic, Force-sensitive amphibians whose culture is steeped in the dark side. And one of the leaders of the Rakata suspects that on Tython is essentially the Star Wars equivalent of a Stargate created by an elder race now extinct. In order to uncover the artifact, the Rakata leader sends his human slave, Xesh, to Tython to infiltrate the Jedi Order and possibly discover the gate. Eventually, though, Xesh decides to side with the Jedi and help them against the Rakata invasion. As for my thoughts on it, well, the sad thing is that unlike the books and even the video games, most Star Wars comics aren't really that good. They're not terrible, they're just mediocre. Often the plot and characters are a lot less interesting than some of the ideas and concepts that each story has. For example, Xesh is kind of an angsty, brooding loner type. Pretty cliche, even by Star Wars standards. The rest of the cast is pretty one-note, dull, serious warrior monks with the occasional wisecracker thrown in. The only two characters I found genuinely entertaining are the villain, Praetor Skulnass, and Dagon Locke, the renegade Jedi. Locke himself is a genuinely interesting character, being incredibly arrogant and egotistical, convinced that he is destined for greatness. While he ultimately does side with the good guys against the Rakata, it's pretty clear that he's mostly looking out for number 1, and he's not afraid to use some pretty amoral methods in order to serve what he believes is the greater good. At the same time, though, he does have 1 or 2 moments of sympathy. He was the one who foresaw the Rakata invasion, but was ultimately banished to the moon of Bogon because the other masters refused to believe him. Honestly, I think the story would have been much better if he'd been the main character from the get-go. As for Skalnos, he is your typical one-note big bad, no subtlety or nuance to him whatsoever. On the other hand, he is genuinely intimidating and monstrous, so at least you love to hate him. If this were ever adapted to live action, I could easily see that with a pretty good actor behind him, you would have a really great diabolical scene-chewing villain in the same vein as General Grievous or Jabba the Hutt. Unfortunately, apart from these two, the whole story itself is pretty bland and forgettable. There's also quite a few missed opportunities here. One example is that one of the side characters is one of the Sith species, and at some point in the story it looks like he might fall to the dark side, which is pretty interesting and suggests that he might be the founder of the Sith Order. But it seems that the story completely drops the subplot somewhere around the 3rd act and it's never mentioned again. Real missed opportunity, if you ask me. But as I said earlier, the real selling point of Dawn of the Jedi is some of the concepts that it introduces. I really like the idea of the Tho-Yor and how we never really learn what their exact connection to the Force is. I also really like the concept of Tython, a world so connected to the Force that it can literally be affected by any changes in it. Star Wars The Clone Wars did something similar with Mortis, but I think they kind of jumped the shark there by representing the balance as a never-ending conflict between the Force equivalent of minor gods. I also really like the Qua and the Infinity Gate, the concept of a technological artifact left behind by a powerful elder race. I really think it does add to the richness and lore of the Star Wars universe, kind of like the Protheans in Mass Effect or the old ones in 40K. My favorite idea, however, is the Force Saber. At this point in history, the Jedi are just using swords, but Xesh has what he calls a Force Saber. It's basically a proto-lightsaber, only instead of a power cell and a focusing crystal, the beam is literally powered by the Force, specifically the dark side. This makes perfect sense, as according to Knights of the Old Republic, the Rakata's technology was entirely Force-driven, and that a Force-powered weapon would utilize emotions like anger and aggression, emotions strongly associated with the dark side. Ultimately, my verdict is that Dawn of the Jedi is a pretty forgettable story with some genuinely interesting ideas. I'd be perfectly fine with either keeping it as canon or discarding it entirely. Personally, though, I'd prefer to see this story rewritten. I'd like to see some of these ideas and even some of the characters incorporated into a story that's actually interesting and entertaining. And so, for lack of any better segue, that makes it the end of the first episode of Star Wars Should This Be Canon? The next 2 weeks will be 40K, The Fall of the Eldar, followed by The Siru and The Truce at Bakura. Until then. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, and check out our website at studiobrainstorm.net. And if you have a story that you think is worth telling, we are more than happy to help you publish it. Thank you, and have a nice day.